Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us today. We broadcast 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. And if you'd like to call us, Jason is at his engineering station at GCN in Minnesota. And the number to call, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Off-Grid Montana's Rich Scheben's with us. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
I'm afraid to answer that or say anything because I have a funny feeling that cars are going to come up in conversation. I'm doing good, buddy.
Did you say cars?
How's everything with you?
Did you say? I heard the word cars.
Yeah.
I know I heard the word cars.
I had
and
a funny
since
feeling it was going
I
to
didn't
come
do
up,
it,
whether I said it or not.
since you mentioned it, I can't believe it. There's Tesla drivers, maybe Tesla owners, are waiting up to an hour to get to the point where they can plug their vehicle in for a charge. Now, I've waited in gas lines, longer than an hour, but that was during the Arab oil embargo in 1973, 1974. And that's the way Mark Twain pronounced it. A-R-A-B. Arab, or Arab, however you pronounce it. There was an oil embargo by the Arabs in 1973, 74, and there were gas lines that were really, really long. And they would stretch around the block. And that's because there was a shortage of gasoline and oil. Well, right now, there are drivers in queue stretched a half a mile long in order to get to some of these fast chargers in Kettleman City, California. So 40 people, there are 40 chargers and still a half hour to an hour to get to them. So if you have a Tesla vehicle, you can't go that far, and it takes a long time to charge them. You might get 7, 8, 10 miles per hour on a regular charger. So if you want to go 70 miles, you might as well, pack a lunch and a lounge chair, and if it'll fit in the vehicle. I don't think I'm up for that. And the problem is it does take a while for electricity to transfer from the charger to the battery bank. So I just wanted to share that. I'm not up for it. I'm not up for it. And if the grid goes down and you don't have a solar panel system or a generator, and what would you run your generator on? It'd have to be something other than gasoline if there's a gas shortage, or diesel if there's a diesel shortage. I'm not up for it. I really am not up for that. So just wanted to mention that. That could be a big problem for those who have jumped on the Tesla bandwagon.
And Vince, I got to make a comment on what you just said, believe it or not, if that's okay.
Yeah.
First of all, they should be called, not electric cars, they should be called 50% coal cars, because 50% of our electricity still comes from coal. Never mind the mining of rare earth minerals, never mining of the disposal of batteries, which is very toxic. Never mind the lack of charge that these technologies offer. And that's what you were talking about. If the carbon footprint was all this climate change, global warming crap was real, and all the scientists that are bought and paid for studies get out versus all the thousands of scientists that put rebuttals to that don't get published. I wonder why. Now, if carbon footprints was such a big deal, then the powers that be, for people like you and me who have solar, they would say, okay, you're green, you have a low carbon footprint, you do not have to pay property taxes ever again, for example, okay? If it was such a deadly thing where we're all going to die in 10 years, they would do something like that. If this was such a deadly issue, then all these celebrities and rich people who have houses around the world wouldn't have them. If this was such a deadly issue, then all these people flying around the world, these wealthy people, even including private jets, it would not happen because there would be a carbon footprint for each person. But see, they don't want to do that. They want to implement these taxes, and then the aristocracy gets to live the same life that they always have. They do not practice what they preach. So it's all a bunch of BS. Until they come out with practice what you preach laws, I don't think they're ever going to hold any water. Vince?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you think back, I keep thinking back to the days, 500 years ago, maybe 600-700 years ago, to Europe, England specifically, and the castles and the kings, and how the kings lived in their finery. They had the finest garments, they had the finest food, and they lived in a castle. And then yet outside the castle, you had, the bottom 93% living in the equivalent of hovels, mud shacks, tents, and out in the open. And that's what you had. So the difference was always there. And I keep thinking back to the kings, and they did not cut their lifestyle for the benefit of the bottom 93%. They didn't do it, and they're still not doing it. And you think about, even our president, Donald Trump, who, he flies around, and when he flies around, he's not in a little Piper Cub or a little Cherokee. He's not in a single-engine plane. He's in a huge fuel burner, huge. And he doesn't fly alone. He flies with a whole bunch of people that have to get to where he is in order to hop on board. And then he has other planes and aircraft flying around to protect him. And he flies back and forth wherever he wants to go. I mean, if he wants to go play golf, he flies. And I'm not picking on him so much as an individual. I'm just saying that that's just one example of what's happening. So there are these rulers all over the world who do the same thing. And then there are people who take vacations and they hop on planes as if there is no consequence to doing that. Okay? But they are burning fuel. There's no question about it. They are using a precious resource, and they're using, but we are, Rich, we are using up the earth as if it's free. We really are. The people who drive these Tesla cars, I don't think they've ever been to a lithium mine and looked at the devastation and the amount of water it takes to produce the rare earth elements that go into these electric coal or these coal-powered cars. I don't think they look at that. And then what do you do with these battery banks when they're depleted and they just don't hold a charge anymore? It used to be that back in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even up to maybe 15 years ago, if you had a problem with your engine, your gasoline-powered or diesel-powered engine, and let's say you wore it out, you'd take the engine out, you'd rebore the cylinders, you'd put in a little oversized pistons and piston rings, put some bearings in it, put it back together, and, the vast majority of the engine would still be the same as it was when you took it out. I mean, you didn't replace the heavy parts. You just replaced some of the moving parts. And you'd be back in business. Now what do? What happens? Do you put new rings and pistons in that battery bank? No, you don't. No, you don't. So how is the end game? How does the recycling game work for all of this material that goes into the sophistication, the batteries of these coal/electric cars? I don't know. And what happens if the electronic infrastructure, the wireless infrastructure goes down? How do these vehicles operate? So I'm really, Rich Scheben, I know you have a vehicle that's older. You have you have an older one and a truck. And so, for me, I like the older style where you put the key in the lock and you turn it. You put the key in the ignition and you turn it, and you're not dependent on these little tiny batteries, these that are shaped the size of a nickel, maybe the size of a nickel and shaped like a nickel. These button batteries, and if you don't have that, you're not going to start your car. If you don't have that, you're not going to get in your car. I mean, it's nice to push the button to raise the trunk on a new vehicle. I mean, that's really kind of nice. But is that hard to take the key out of the ignition or take the key out of your pocket and put it into the trunk lock and turn the lock cylinder? Is it that hard? I mean, are we that stupid that we can't remember to bring our keys? Are we that stupid that we don't have an extra set in case something happens to the first set? As a matter of fact, the manufacturers provide 2 sets of keys when they sold the vehicles. And there was a time when you could go to Walmart or any auto store or any hardware store and for 59 or 49 or 39 cents, buy a replacement key. You can't do it anymore. A key for a new vehicle is like $300, $400, $500, $600, $700, maybe even $1,000. I know a guy, this is unbelievable, I know a guy who had a set of those keys, and he had all the keys on one ring. He lost it. And he had to get a whole new set of keys. It was about $2,000 because he lost the keys to one, these electronic keys, the kind that have the sensor in the plastic, the part that you hold between your thumb and forefinger. He lost that little transponder part that allowed his car to recognize that exact key. A $750 key. So what do? Well, you go to the dealer and they type in the VIN number, and then they can make your key. But you have to prove ownership. This is crazy. Just a few thoughts. Back to you.
Yeah. Well, I think the big thing is when they talk about electric, green, climate change, global warming, I think the biggest issue is we are allowing the elites, the aristocracy, to not only control the narrative, but we don't have the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. The people who are screaming the loudest are saying that the little people have to pay the taxes for all this carbon footprint stuff, but yet they're not willing to curb their amount of houses, the amount of driving they do, and especially the amount of flying that they do. There was an old saying that George Carlin was probably famous for. He's saying that, and he's talking to the little people, that we are not in the club. Well, the only way we're going to get our freedoms and liberties to a point that's going to make people happy is to start our own club. And that's why, they call it left-wing propaganda, but everything that comes from the Democrats, from the left, is funded by the wealthiest people in the world, and that's why there's only 6 media companies who own everything, or at least 90-something% of everything. So, folks, we just have to start our own media, and that's what we're trying to do. We have to create our own ideas and solutions and stick up for the little guy.
Yeah, I've got a comment about the plan for that when we come back. I'm talking about how the media is controlled by 6. We'll be right back. OffGridMontana.com. Rich Scheben. Rich Scheben's with us in class. There's a publication, and it's very controversial. And some people will say that it's not real. They'll say that it's bogus. That the protocols in this document are not real. However, around 1900, maybe a little bit after 1900, there's a book called The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. And in this publication, it was a hardbound book, there are protocols that say in order to take over, certain things have to be done. And I'm paraphrasing. It's been quite some time since I've opened that book. But it's, in order to take over the media has to be owned by those who are taking over. So that would be movies, television, theater, publications, the newsprint, and today would be the internet as well, and magazines. Now, of course, in 1900 there wasn't the internet and there wasn't television, and radio was just in its infancy. So media would have to be taken over. Now, I'm paraphrasing, and I'm including technologies that weren't available in around 1900, 1910. And books, and then education would have to be controlled and directed by those who want to take over. And then medicine would have to be controlled and taken over. And then the economic system would have to be controlled and taken over. And the political system would have to be controlled and taken over by whatever group would be wanting to run the show. So you have the media, you have education, you have medicine, you have the economy, and you have the political arena. And it's been claimed that the Zionists are the ones who said, we can take over if we control these areas of life, of humanity. And then some people say, well, that's anti-Semitic. So I'm just telling you, and if I go any farther on this discussion, we'll be removed from the air. This is something that you cannot talk about. And I'm not kidding about this. So I cannot take a position on this. But what I am telling you is that you might want to read this for yourself and see what is in the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. And I'm trying to find something that says, okay. According to archive.org, the protocols of the learned elders of Zion is a list of plans and methods that the Jewish leaders in the late 1800s planned to use for the Jews to take control and manipulate governments and their people around the world. That's it in a nutshell. So do your own research if you want to know. And if you think about it, whether or not you believe that it's the Zionists, whether or not you think it's a particular group of people, if you think about this and you think about, wow, has our political system been taken over? Yeah, it has. Has our media been taken over? Yep. Has our monetary system been taken over? Yep. Has education been taken over? Yep. And if you don't believe that, just look at how homosexuality is being taught in the public training camp, how transgender is being taught in the public training camp. So have those protocols been deployed? They have. Now, the question is, do you believe by whom? Rich Scheben, you have any thoughts on what I just, a little can of worms I opened up?
Well, yeah, we can turn those worms into snakes real easy. I mean, we can talk about this for the whole show. I mean, there's so much evidence between Mossad, MI6, CIA, and other intelligence agencies in the U.S. basically taking over a lot of things. If we had more patriotism, more nationalism, and it was strong, I think less people would be willing to be bought and paid for. This is one of the reasons why we're calling for the declassification of Uranium-1, the Clinton Foundation, the FISA warrant documents.
Hold that thought.
All documents
Hold that thought. Rich Scheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. Rich, you're talking about declassification. We went into the break. Please continue.
Yeah, well, thank you, Vince. You know, until a little sidebar here, folks, if we don't stick together as American people, as the land of the free and the home of the brave, we will never see freedom and liberty again. We'll never see anything that made our country great ever again. And the first thing that needs to happen for us to get truth, for us to get less propaganda, lies, false flags, and hoaxes, is to eliminate big tech censorship and surveillance, and we need to fix the voter election fraud system. Okay, if we don't, everything's going to be fake. Definitions, unit of measures, product reviews, bond ratings, earnings, velocity of money, overall fundamentals, and this is why we need a U.S. intranet controlled by the people, because words don't even mean anything anymore. Everything's been diluted or changed for the alibi of the status quo. So what we need to do is talk about ideas and solutions and plans of actions for the little people so we can get true information, because technology is basically dumbing us down more, because the censoring and surveillance is basically giving the wrong people the wrong information for the purpose of distracting, dumbing down, and dividing the American people. I've given countless, thousands of examples, as you know, Vince, over the years on this. You know, let's just talk about one reason regarding the declassifications. Do you remember that traitor Bergdahl? He was released in exchange for 5 Taliban generals. Apparently, it was to cover up the Obama-Hillary Stinger missile sales to Libya. Now, we need information on this. There's a lot of articles on this, and it's getting more and more popular. And apparently, there's a good chance we need to get this information, because President Donald Trump is going through hell. He's given what does he take a salary of $1 a year, and he gives basically gives his salary to charity. I think he just gave his last quarterly salary to opioid epidemics. I mean, this guy has put himself and his family out there to take a bunch of heat. He's been, from what I've read, there's been attempts on his life. He's lost net worth. I don't understand how the followers can believe the stuff that comes from the mainstream media when everything has been proven to be a hoax, false flags, lies, propaganda, everything. So the people want to know about this, the real story regarding why Ambassador Stevens was sent to Benghazi to secretly retrieve U.S.-made Stinger missiles that the State Department had supplied to Libya without congressional oversight or permission. Now, I think this is one of the reasons that they are doing this impeachment. They want to get President Trump out of office every way possible. Same thing with the Epstein pedophiles and all this stuff. But if Secretary of State then, Hillary Clinton, brokered a deal with Libya through Ambassador Stevens for these Stinger missiles, and they did end up in Afghanistan hands, some of them, which took out some of our troops. You know, we're talking treason, sedition, espionage. And see, the powers that be do not want this information to get out. This is why we talk about declassifications. This is why we talk about truth. You know, this isn't rocket science. You know, here's the article I was just referring to. President Trump donates salary to fight opioid crisis. And basically everything he does that's good gets taken out of context, gets a spin job, and of course he's a controversial racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, violent, hater with an anti in front of every word, and ism, ist, and phobia on the back of every word. We're dealing with fifth grade stuff. As you can see, this is all about changing the narrative. This is all about controlling information. And the people need to have citizen review boards. We need grand juries. We need public forums so the information can get to the people, because the 6 corporations that own everything, that control all the information, are all bought and paid for. And there's no difference between a Hollywood actor and a newscast person who is on the mainstream media. There's zero difference. Here's an article right here. Clarence Thomas slams Biden-led confirmation hearings, warns it's a modern-day liberal, bigger impediment than a Klansman. Well, I'm sure Clarence Thomas knows, because he's extremely intelligent. He knows that the Klans, the KKK, was started by the Democratic Party. So, and I don't know where things are going, but here's another article right here, Vince. The FBI suddenly finds 72,000 pages of documents Hillary tried to delete. Now, I'm going to go on a little sidebar here. Let's say we did something very illegal, whether we had a private server in a high-profile government secret job, and then we bleach-bitted it, and then we hammered it, and then we threw the rest away, and we left some information on Anthony Weiner's computer to hide it. I mean, what would happen to us, or the little people listening to us? We would be in the who's gal. We would be Roger Stoned. We would be Julian Assanged, at the very least. And this is what's happening. We're getting. I mean, everything is fake. Here's an article right here. Fake. I'm sure we all heard about this. Newsweek just said over Thanksgiving that President Trump was golfing and tweeting when he was in Afghanistan with our troops. You can't even make this stuff up. And here we got people in the globalist cabal, like Angela Merkel, saying that we need to curtail freedom of speech to keep our society free. I can almost not speak because how stupid that sentence is. I mean, everything is corrupt. Everything's bought and paid for. And here, the CFR reveals $350,000 received from Epstein, pledges towards human trafficking. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And again, this is one of the reasons I say adult mutual consensual sex. I just think it's hard to go into somebody's house and tell them what kind of sex to have. But leave the frickin' kids alone. So I'm hoping, Vince, and we've talked about this, and I've mentioned on the air, that if the declassifications for all the things that we're asking for, especially all the Epstein documents, does not come out, I think America will fall. I have no doubt about that. If we don't have the 10,000 names from the Epstein files, the CIA and FBI files, and whatever was in Anthony Weiner's computer, if this stuff does not come out, then America will fall. It's just that simple. Most people don't care. If Prince Andrew came out and he said, well, I'm bisexual, or I'm homosexual, or I'm going to transition to a woman, or any of this stuff that's going on today, you know what? Most people probably wouldn't care. But the reason why people are caring is because there's actual evidence and survivors of him boinking little kids. I don't think it's a lot to ask to leave the kids alone. That's why I use the term adult mutual consensual sex. No rape, no pedophilia, and that's why the powers that be are doing everything in their power to normalize it with drag queens, story hours at public libraries and schools and things like that. They are in a hurry to normalize and legalize this so they can create a precedent. Precedents are being, it's theater every day. It's just like this Blasey Ford and all those women who came out for the Kavanaugh rape, the Kavanaugh effect, which it'll be called for the next 100 years if our society lives that long. It basically was created to set a precedent to eliminate due process. It's just like how the Democrats went in and changed the definition of whistleblower. and they created this hoax that it can now be hearsay. They're changing terms, changing definitions, changing laws. We do not have a rule of law in America. And how ironic, here's an article that says Americans simply can't afford lawyers anymore. No, lawyers are to get the super wealthy, the aristocracy out of jams. Lawyers have been bought and paid for to ignore law. You know, and this is a very tightly controlled article right here, Vince, and chime in any time to stop me, because I can talk about this one forever. American life expectancy dropping dramatically thanks to white working class male suicides. Now, when I tried to sue, when Human Resources at GlaxoSmithKline told me that part-time job shares were for women only, when I was diagnosed with spinal stenosis, lawyers told me I did not have enough group self-pity points. So hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications means nothing. It means nothing that 99.9% of combat deaths around the world are male. Doesn't mean that work mortality of 94% worldwide is men. Homicide, 76%. Suicides, and this is like a year and a half, 2-year-old data, 75% suicides for males. So much for male privilege. It's all a hoax. Everything is a hoax. There's no war on women. The war is on masculinity and males, because the powers that be want them out of the picture so they can take off. This is why Congress doesn't represent the people anymore. They're bought and paid for. They represent the lobbyists and the PACs and the special interests. So it's very sad to see what's happening anymore. When we've lost the ability to judge for a job based on hard work and proven results and qualifications, we go down a very dangerous path. Very dangerous path.
And one of the terms that comes up regarding what you're talking about is statutory rape. That's when a person under the age has intercourse with a person over the age of consent. We'll be right back. The age of consent by state differs. And in the United States, the age of consent is the legal age at which a person is considered mature enough to consent to have sex. However, the age is set by individual state laws. Sexual relations with an individual under the state's mandated age of consent is considered statutory rape. And anyone under the age of consent does not have the ability to consent in the eyes of the law. So you can be prosecuted, or a person can be prosecuted for statutory rape. And what does that mean? Those found guilty can face fines and jail time as much as $25,000, actually up to $100,000, and 50 years in prison, depending on the state. So what is the age of consent by state? And I'm going to tell you. There's a table that I found in worldpopulationreview.com. So the following states have an age of consent of 16 years. Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas, Connecticut, Georgia, Hawaii, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, North Carolina, Ohio, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, South Dakota, Vermont, Washington, West Virginia, and Wyoming. The age of consent being 17 years old is the following states: Colorado, Illinois, Louisiana, Missouri, New York, and Texas. 18 years old, the age of consent is Arizona, California, Delaware, Florida, Idaho, North Dakota, Oregon, Tennessee, Utah, Virginia, and Wisconsin. So there you have it, the age of consent by state. And I wanted to mention something about, go back to the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. There are 24 of them. I'm just going to list what they are, and then you can use your imagination and experience and what you've read and learned to see if you think any of these things have happened. So the first protocol is the basic doctrine. The second protocol is economic wars. The third is the methods of conquest. The fourth is materialism replacing religion. The fifth is despotism and modern progress. The sixth is the takeover technique. 7, worldwide wars. 8th is a provisional government. 9th is re-education. 10th is preparing for power. 11, the totalitarian state. 12, control of the press. 13, distractions. 14, assault on religion. 15, ruthless suppression. 16, brainwashing. 17, abuse of authority. 18, arrest of opponents. 19, rulers and the people. 20, the financial program. 21, loans and credit. 22, the power of gold. 23, instilling obedience. And 24 is the qualities of the ruler. So if you think about it, are there distractions now? How about assault on religion? How about brainwashing? How about abuse of authority? How about arrest of opponents? How about worldwide wars? How about re-education? How about economic wars? How about materialism replacing religion? How about the young people? What do they want? Whatever it is, they want it now. Right now. So, have these protocols been implemented? Well, I'd say they have. Rich Scheben?
Well, yeah, Vince, we talk about this often. You know, if you read Marx, Alinsky, the Frankfurt School, the Communist Manifesto, all this stuff that makes people drunk on the Kool-Aid of political correctness, that what you just read is in those documents. And this is all a plan. This is their template. They are literally following a playbook, a flow chart of these type of things. Now, going back to what you said, you know, as long as we continue to keep our mouth shut and the silent majority stays silent, we're going to enable big corporations and corrupt governments, and that's basically what fascism is. And as far as what you were saying, as far as age of consent, well, I think it should just be 18 all the way around. There's an article right here, Teacher of the Year arrested for alleged BJ with student. Now, it's from Round Rock, Texas. Her name was Randy Chaviria at 36 years old. So, you know, if they just leave the kids alone, I think everything would be a lot better, because they're using pedophilia as sex as a blackmail tool to control the people.
Yeah, Round Rock, Texas. That's the home of Republic Broadcasting Network. And we are tape delayed right there from Round Rock, Texas on Republic Broadcasting. We'll be right back. Hour number 2 of the USA Prepares. Rich Scheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. And class, you've heard me say this before. I have some of the most wonderful friends whom I've never met. Really. Welcome, George, in New Hampshire.
Hi, Benny, and hi, Rick.
Hey, George.
Hi.
I was talking about you, George.
I'm sorry? I'm sorry, Vincent.
I was talking about you when I said I have some of the most wonderful friends I've never met, and I was talking about you.
You know, I feel the same way about you and, you know, the faculty. The only thing I'm holding out for is, you know, an office with a southerly view over the chicken coop. That's all. When I come up with tenure, you know. So anyway, some joke. Anyway, so I just.
Hey, George, I think I can actually pull that off for you, buddy. If you ever come out to Montana for a visit.
Well, what else are friends for, right, Rich?
That's right, George.
Hey, I'll tell you, Rich, if I could ask you this question, it just occurred to me that in Montana, I heard when they were bringing in a lot of this New World Order's United Nations stuff, that they were using Montana as kind of like a test balloon, so to speak, where I heard a lot of things were going on in Montana, that it was more or less remote enough that it didn't make the mainstream media too much. But in other words, people were reporting that things were going on there that were like basically encroaching upon the people's rights. Could you kind of enlighten us a little bit on that, please?
Well, I remember hearing something about that too, and that's one of the reasons why, when you're a rural state, you can hide a lot of things. And I don't know, I hear words. Us little people are behind the scenes, George. We get the lies and the propaganda. We don't get the real information. And Vince, regarding George's question, you mentioned about wars earlier. A lot of the propaganda comes from the intelligence agencies, like especially the CIA and the military-industrial complex. And this is why we need a U.S. intranet controlled by the people. And I just want to, mention a few of these things that has happened throughout U.S. history to get us into wars. Like a Maine ship in 1898 was blown up to enter the Hispanic-American War. Same thing happened in Lusitania in 1915 to enter World War I. We all remember Pearl Harbor and how we pushed the Japanese economically to attack. And apparently we knew 10 days in advance, and the whole iron base that killed thousands of people never got the information. Same thing with the Baeatong in that supposed made-up North Vietnamese torpedo stunt, that got us into Vietnam. Same thing with the Iraqis, what happened in Iraq, destroying, remember they were so-called destroying nurseries to invade Kuwait in 1991. And, of course, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq again in 2003. And 9/11, a lot of controversy around that to basically destroy our Constitution and get us into a war on terror, create a Patriot Act, and basically eliminate our rights. So, George, I'll be honest with you. I hear a lot of stuff, and, most of us in the alternative media, we all have our own connections, but it's really difficult to know what's true or not. And that's one of the reasons I try to shed light with a lot of these new media / alternative media articles to wake people up, to show how we're being distracted, dumbed down, and divided. I hear rumors in a lot of places about a lot of things, about a lot of technologies, about a lot of surveillance, censorship, terror cells in our country. I hear a lot of stuff. And I think the only thing we can do, George, instead of commenting on something we don't get 100% of accurate information on, is do everything in our that's possible to wake the people up and make people understand that we lost over 1 million combat soldiers for a lot of false flag wars, for a lot of benefits. Wars started by our intelligence agencies and for the benefit of the military-industrial complex, where a lot of the aristocracy actually bought and paid for both sides of the war for their own personal benefit. So I think if we can eliminate censorship and surveillance from big tech and fix voter and election fraud, I think that would go a long way to eliminating all the plans of action being done nefariously by the people who have committed treason, espionage, and sedition against our country, so the little people, meaning us, could get the true information and say, hey, we don't want this, because the media and the powers that be are, the State Department, everything. I mean, President Trump, he almost looks like he's by himself in the White House. I don't see a lot of support around him. And this is why I'm hoping these declassifications occur, because the power needs to go back to the people, like President Trump said. If we don't have power, every false flag, every hoax, piece of propaganda, it's all going to occur, and they're doing a really good job, as you know, George, dividing us amongst skin pigmentation shades, genders, sexual orientation, religion, and it's only going to get worse if the little people does not control our own destiny and control a machine that's totally out of control.
But I think it's reached the stage that, and I think, Vincent, you'll agree with me, and Rich, I think you'll agree with me too on this, that we can talk about it till we're blue in the face. And I'm not saying you gentlemen are like the Paul Reveres or who are riding to say the British are coming during the Revolutionary War. You're wanting the people to rise up, take action, and stop it. Now, they did, and that's why we ended up with the country that we had. But with these wars that were purposely organized, the Japanese were purposely built up just for that purpose. The Germans were built up under Hitler, massive influx of monies, and he could take credit for it, and I'm not saying that they didn't utilize the money in ways that were to build up the society there, but also in ways that were also to, diminish a lot of the humanity in the country. I'm saying that, in other words, the child's in the womb isn't even safe in the womb. In many instances, that womb is turning into a tomb. And the elderly are being euthanized. And what did they say? Our fathers and our grandfathers' sperm count was maybe 2 or 3 times higher than what it is now, where there's a silent agenda to a quiet war, as Deborah Tavares would say, to basically sterilize the population. And then you have people who are encouraged to do practices where every queer group, because that's what it is, it's queer, it's sick, it's deviant, all right? And if I can't say that out loud, and I know you gentlemen wouldn't stop me from saying, but in other words, that's twisting something where, like a priest said, you take a part of the anatomy that's meant for regeneration, and they turn it around so that it somehow connects with the part of the anatomy that's for defecation. And I'm not trying to be crude here, gentlemen, but I'm just saying is that this further destroys, adulterates the mind, the soul, the body, and it's so far seeping in that I'm just saying, in other words, it gets to the point where how is a young woman who's kept herself moral and takes care of herself and wants to have a family, and a young man who does the same and wants to find a young woman or a woman that he can have children with, and they find they're carrying sexually transmitted diseases that increasingly are defying the medical establishment from even curing, and further destroying the reproductive system. So that basically, as the song goes, we're on the eve of destruction. And how much further can it go? I'll bet these planners that are trying to destroy the country can't even believe how docile, how quiet, and how easy it is for them to have brought about their agenda. And we're like deer in the headlights. And I'm not insulting anyone, but these wars tore apart families, the battle of the sexes that they played upon the selfishness of each side and encouraged a lot of use and abuse and resentment between the men and the women who basically, they're the very soul of humanity. And what they're doing, they're being attacked on every front, is, Vincent, Rich. And we've been talking about it to the face, but just the fact that a place like Mambla, the man and boy love associate, could even exist and have a storefront is just incomprehensible. And they want there to be a war, but they want this country to be so far down. It's like the communists would always be. They'd massively build up a military, and they would not attack until they knew for sure they were 99% sure of winning.
Mm-hmm. Well, George, we've talked about a lot of these things. You know, I've spent hours, days over the years talking about ideas and solutions. I've mentioned about the estrogen mimickers that's in our plastics and our food. You know, I've talked about fluoride, basically making women sterile and making everybody else docile. I'm mentioning these terms and these words because you had mentioned them just in the last few minutes. I talk about the immune stimulation or stimulants versus immune suppressants, you know, the MSGs and all the synthetic, artificial, refined, processed foods that are out there, the lack of antioxidants, how our immune system is being attacked. You know, we've talked about a lot of this stuff over the years, and that's why we talk about avoiding GMO and going organic, and we've talked about gardening and raising animals and hunting and fishing and all this stuff. So we try to give a lot of ideas and solutions, but what I'm hearing, and not so much in Montana, but I'm hearing this when I talk to other people around the country, a lot of young ladies, because Montana probably is the number one state for testosterone, but, and I can't prove that, but when I look at, when I talk to young women are saying they don't even want to get married anymore because they feel in a few years when they're ready to marry, half of the men are going to be transgender. Now, that's very disturbing, and with all the estrogen mimickers in our food, water, and storage, I believe it.
Hold that thought. George, please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Sure.
Rich Scheben with us, offgridmontana.com. George in New Hampshire's with us, USA Prepares Instructor. And I wanted to mention, George, something quite uncanny, because I was going to play today The Eve of Destruction. It's a protest song. It was written by P.F. Sloan, S-L-O-A-N, in the mid-1964 year. And it's been recorded by several artists, but best known by Barry McGuire. It describes social issues of the 1960s, the assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the draft, the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, the space program, what was happening in the Middle East, nuclear war. And some radio stations decided that they didn't want to play it because, well, it seemed like it was aiding the enemy in the Vietnam conflict. So I was going to copy that to the hard drive and play it today. And it's quite fascinating to me, George, that you and I are thinking of the same thing, but I decided not to play it, and I'll tell you why. I didn't want to take the 3 minutes away from Rich Scheben to play that. So I'll play it another time, but that was really, really high on my list of things that we needed to share. And there is a Netflix video that you should consider watching, and I don't know what it's called, but it's about the Vietnam War, and it's on Netflix right now. It's a documentary, and you will see how we have been lied to, and to get us into the Vietnam War, and how the United States government corporation lied to us about the atrocities, lied to us about how many of our men were being slaughtered and killed in Vietnam, and how we weren't told that it was so difficult for us to figure out who was who because our enemy looked just like our friends. So the Viet Cong, the North Vietnamese looked like the South Vietnamese. And we had a great difficulty trying to figure out who was our enemy and who wasn't. It was an awful time in the United States. And I asked a U.S. general who was on the air with me, General Vallely, exactly why were we there, because I don't know. And you know what? I believe he had a difficult time explaining why we were there, too. So people who are baby boomers who would have been there, and my draft number was over 200, and I was in school, so I was not drafted. But if I were, I don't know if I would have gone. I don't know, because I didn't know what it was about. It was not like our country being attacked, whether we were provoked into being attacked or not. But Germany declared war on the United States, and Japan, attacked us in what we were told was a surprise attack. So my uncles, every one of them who was able to serve, served. Every single one of them. And they all came back damaged. Every single one. Because war is really awful. Can you imagine sitting in your front yard and there are bombs going off all around you, or bullets being fired at you, or being on a troop ship in the Pacific and kamikaze airplanes are strafing you and using the one bomb that they have to drop it down the smokestack of that ship. And then when that was all done, dive bombing into the area of the ship that would do the most damage and take it down. And then men jumping into the ocean with nowhere to go because the ship was on fire. And so were the other ships all around. That's just a tip of the iceberg of what war is like. It's awful. And it's also a racket. So, George, I wanted to thank you for that.
May I say, I can concur with you, Vincent, many times, and I'm sure Rich will agree. Many times I'd wake up in the morning or the night before and I'd think of something, and it'd be almost like I was on the same wavelength where I was getting the same transmission you were, because invariably you would talk about it the next day or that week. And I hear the music, and may I hang on just a little bit longer?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
And class, the average age of the 3 instructors you have now is probably pretty close to 66. Think about that. Think about that. What are you guys going to do in the future? Rich Scheben's with us, Off-Grid Montana. George is with us in New Hampshire. George, you had mentioned that we're like the Paul Revere's of our day. But the advantage that Paul Revere had was that about 3% of the people who were living in the country at the time were actually listening and paying attention. We can't get 3% of the people to pay attention now. That's the difference.
Vincent, just before the break, you said something about the average age, and I didn't catch all of it. Could you please repeat that statistic if you could?
Well, okay. Monday, when we were on with Norm Shuley, Sonny Skidmore was on as an instructor, Norm Shuley and I, and the average age was 81.6 years old of the 3 instructors. Today, the average age of the instructors is, mid-60s, at least, I think.
I'm 66.
Me probably being...
You're 67,
okay,
right?
I'm 68 now. And, Rich, how about you?
I'm 59, but I'm planning on holding on to 59 for about another 25 years, just FYI.
Yeah.
You know what it is, guys? So, and we talked about this. It's the lack of information. It's just like the video I sent Vince, George, a few days ago about a millennial who didn't know how to use a can opener. Technology is not only killing us, but we're losing skill sets because we're not getting the proper information. All the information that's getting out there is going against us. Let me just share a couple articles with you. 300 Trump ads taken down by YouTube, no reason given. California DMV basically hijacks and makes $50 million per year selling your personal information. Lisa Page bemoans Trump's attacks in an interview, but it was never mentioned that she texts with her lover Strzok basically to try to eliminate the presidency and eliminate what the people voted for. It's information, folks. The people who need the information isn't getting accurate information because the mentor-protege relationship is gone. And the powers that be have an addiction to power, money, and control. And they don't want prosperity. They don't want equality. They want to lower the bars of standards and expectations, especially for getting a job and keeping a job. And you were talking about the division earlier, George, between males and females. You can't even use those terms anymore because you're a bigot, racist, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, or skin pigmentation shades, or religion, or sexual orientation. You know, it's because when you lower the bars of standards and expectations in a country that was built on capitalism, you eliminate the appreciation, the legitimacy, the value, and the dignity of work. Okay, when a country, you know, and pardon my economic 101 appreciation, you know, 70% of our GDP growth is measured by consumption. Well, when work no longer has value or dignity or legitimacy because you get a job now based on what group you're in, like skin pigmentation, shade, gender you identify as, sexual orientation, etc., and hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications no longer matter. And that's why I mentioned that one article about how males life expectancy in America is going down because males are committing suicide at such a high rate, including white working class males, which is the biggest subset. So when people can no longer control their own destiny because we're not getting the information, and if we don't get the information and we can't use that information to better our lives through work, then there's no hope. And that's where we're at. We need to go back to the information. We need to have a U.S. intranet controlled by the people and not by our spy agencies, not by China, not by the EU. That's what we need. We need to, I'm telling you right now, we can talk and be Paul Revere's all day long. If we don't eliminate big tech surveillance and censorship and eliminate voter and election fraud, we might as well hang up the phone now. Because without those two, we will lose our Bill of Rights, our Constitution, and everything the million-plus combat soldiers died for through fraudulent false flags to keep our freedoms and liberties. Because if we don't do that, it's all gone. All of it.
You talked about big tech spying. So Fox New York has an article, and banks are now using your transactions, the ones that you use with your credit cards, to monitor you and promote products just the way Google has been and Facebook has been. So now the banks, who have even more information about you, what you buy. So if you think that you can go to Las Vegas, use your credit card and have it be secret, they can't. You can't, because they know. And banks used to be very, very protective of the data of where you go, what you buy. No longer. So banks are working with retailers in order to suggest to you what you should buy. So, for example, if you go to Starbucks, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, they know that. They know that. Why don't they advertise for you to go the days that you don't go to Starbucks and have you go 7 days a week instead of just 3 days a week? And they know where you eat. They know if you charge that purchase at McDonald's or Burger King, or whether you go to Victoria's Secret, even though she doesn't have any secrets. They know a lot about you, and now banks are using that information to sell you more. And who are they? Well, that would be Wells Fargo, Chase, as well as other banks. So it's not really discussed at this point, but I know it's absolutely true, because in 1985, when I worked for one of the largest credit card banks in the country, building computer systems for them, the vice president of marketing came into the president's office when I was giving the president an update as to a system I was building. And he was talking about segregating the groups of customers. Those who want points, those who are frugal, those who want free miles for flying and so forth. Those who don't care. Those who have so much money they don't know what to do with it. Segregating those groups and targeting them with ads. Because why? We knew what they bought and we knew when they bought it. In 1985. So I think that we are in for a rough ride if you want privacy. And the only way I think you're going to get some privacy is to do what I did. That is to grow a beard, look disheveled, and when they say smile for your license picture, you puff out your face like you're blowing a trombone. You've got Band-Aids all over your face. And you wear a turtleneck sweater. You comb your hair down over your forehead as best you can, and you close your eyes and squint and shape your face so it is so it looks like you're paralyzed on half. Now, who do we know that might have done that? Jeez. I'm thinking it'll come to me. It'll come to me. And if we didn't have trolls, I could show you some pictures like that. I could show you. So think about that, class. You want to be proud and get that beautiful picture that you can show your friends on your license? Or do you want to, that's going to go into the database for facial recognition? Or do you want one that's going to look like you're a hillbilly and homeless at the same time? And when people ask me, what have you done? Well, I was doing some research. I was doing research to figure out if people who looked homeless were treated differently from people who didn't look homeless. And I was doing a research project to see if it, firsthand. I didn't want to read about it. I want to try it. And I'll tell you what, those of us who look homeless get treated differently. And I was so ashamed of how I looked after I saw my license picture that I immediately shaved off all that stuff that I had on my face. It was terrible. But now I need to get a sombrero and walk around.
I'll give you a tip that some friends of mine, Bill Hudock and Pastor Butch Pogg, they're good friends. They, when they made in West Virginia the provision that a cross-dressing transvestite could go in and have a picture taken, well, that opened up the door. So I know Butch is a part Cherokee, and I don't know about Phil. I can't speak, but I think he might have some Native American blood in him, too. Well, they showed up in full Native American dress, and Pastor Butch had his wife put some reflective makeup paint just under his eyes, so when the picture flashed, it distorted the actual retina and the actual eye, because he felt that, that's your uniqueness that they're stealing. And then they're giving it overseas to Interpol and all else, far beyond the borders and the confines of where you're getting your driver's license. One thing, Rich, I don't know if you've heard, but Vincent had Phil Udock, who they went to arbitration against the government after going through all the court system, and they have come up with Peace Treaty 2020 that will revert to us the status of almost like diplomats, where we'll be immune from the corptocracy that we find ourselves in, and we'll be like the Native Americans, that basically a treaty will be made that and you can opt in until December 25th. And then he's going to Washington. He served all the way up through the Supreme Court, the President, Speaker of the House, so on and so forth, all the way up. And in arbitration, they won. So now there's going to be a settlement. And you may not even be able to pay taxes on your properties, because you'll opt out of that whole. You'll be restored to what the original founders of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights gave us, and that has been incrementally stolen from us. But check it out at Phil Udock, HUDOK.info. And
that's
you might want to opt into that.
Hudock.info, HUDOK.info. And about the war paint, I didn't do that, but what happened to me was I thought I had something on my face that needed a big Band-Aid, and I thought I needed to put iodine on there to heal whatever it was that I might have thought I had. And so this iodine was bleeding through the Band-Aid, and so that was, that was just over my eyebrows. And I did not have reflective paint, but that darn flash, the gal remembered me from 6 years ago. She said, Vincent, you have to keep your eyes open. You have to keep your eyes open. And I said, that flash, just the thought of it makes me squint and close my eye. I can't help it. Class, I want to try something that should never be done. And we've got George in New Hampshire. He's been with us for 45 minutes, 35 seconds. We've got Kyle in Montana, 14 minutes, and Robert in Kansas. I'm going to see if I can put more than one call on the air at a time. So if I lose anybody, my apologies. Okay, we've got George, Kyle. I can't. Oh, okay. Okay.
If you want, Vincent, to make it easy, if you want me to drop off, I think Rich and I have warmed up the audience enough for Kyle to come in now.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
And George, hey, I just want to tell you, buddy, if you still want that view of the chicken coop, I can supply the porch, the chewing tobacco, and the banjo if you come out to Montana.
Do you make it awfully tempting, Rich? I'll believe. I'm going to consider that. Don't be surprised if I take you up on that offer.
George, thanks so much for being with us.
All right. God bless. Take care, John.
Kyle, welcome. Thanks for being on hold.
You bet. No problem. Rich, I tend in my own personality to be, I boil stuff down as far as I think it can go so that it actually ends up becoming a simple answer. And I don't think there's no possible way we're going to stop the surveillance state. It's not going to happen. We're not going to stop the people trying to take our freedom away. The reality is we are headed for a revolution. And one of the protocols of Zion that Vince mentioned there was a strong, or I can't remember exactly the term, but basically a forceful put down of any resistance. That's coming. And so in my opinion, folks, like Rich has said over and over and over again, you better get to some place where you can grow your own food, where you have people you can trust a little bit anyway, something that's along the same lines of that think like you. And one hopeful note here, Vince, is that there is other websites, Patriot Nurse, a few other little ones like that, where young guys have been talking. I think if they try to take the guns, we're going to find out. I think we'll have 3%. But the problem we're going to end up with that I perceive happening is in the North-South Civil War last time you had defined lines. Here you don't. They're all over the country. And I'm afraid that it's going to devolve quickly into a race war because that is that's going to be the only thing people can see that they're going to use as a determining factor over whether or not you're liberal or conservative. That's my opinion.
So, hold on one second, Rich, please. Let me just share with you a paraphrase from some hunters around here in Missouri. Hunters will say, well, shoot, hunting season's coming up. It's going to be here next week. I better get me a box of shells. Now, class, think about that. So it's one thing to have a rifle, pistol, shotgun. It's another thing to have the ammunition for it. So don't be like the hunters around here and get you a box of shells, and that's 50, the week of, or the day of, or the day before hunting season. You need to have your ammo. You need to have your scopes sighted in. You need to know how to use those tools. Before you can't get them anymore. Any comments, Kyle?
I agree completely, Vince. Around here, I find that almost stunning because it is so countercultural to what's around here. I was visiting a guy that I didn't even know hardly had any guns at all, and here he was sitting on an AR-15 with 2,000 rounds of ammunition. and he's not prepared anything other than that. I mean, he at least he was awake enough to be able to see that they're thinking, and he had like 8 clips. I couldn't believe it. I was shocked that anybody like him, you know what I mean, would even be, but he was awake enough to at least be able to see that.
We need to do a broadcast, Kyle, and some of the other instructors, George, Rich, and talk about what tools would be nice to have, and do you need a scope for those tools? What do you need those cheese graters on the front, or are you okay with iron sights? Let's do that coming up in the next few weeks, if that's okay.
I would love to.
Hey, Vince, let me chime in real quick here because we only have a few seconds left.
Yeah.
I realize, Kyle, everything is unsustainable. I know things don't look good. I know things will change in the next several years. Most people will agree with that. But I believe that one of the major reasons we are doing what we do on national radio is because we're trying to wake people up. We're trying to give ideas and solutions. We're trying to discuss these things with the people in the hierarchy. So maybe we can have public forums. Maybe we can create ideas that benefit the people without a civil war. And that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
I hope you make it, Rich. I really do.
Kyle, thanks so much. Robert, we're out of time. Any 10-second comments?
No, you old guys have a good day, okay? I'll see you.
Yeah, thank you.